We've talked about the three major types of filtration and some of the details to better understand what they are. So now let's answer one of the most common questions. What's the best filter for me? Welcome to Filtration 101. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today in kind of the final episode for a while of Filtration 101, we're going to talk about what's the best filter for you. This might be a little different than you think it is, but trust me, this is more about understanding how we approach the actual physical thing that's doing the filtration for us in our Filtration 101 series, as opposed to being like, this is the perfect product. This is more understanding based on what our regime, our schedule, and the amount of work we want to do is, what the right system is for us to use. So for this purpose, I want you to think about filtration in three ways: natural filtration, internal filtration, and external filtration. Two of them sound really similar to each other, but trust me, there's an important difference. So let's first talk about natural filtration. If you're a fan of someone like, say, Lucas Bretz or Dr. Kevin Novak, Father Fish, they present various ways of natural filtration, using the environment and basically the environment alone, whether it's via plants, creating a plenum, or creating a deep sand bed to create some form of filtration system that naturally happens to do everything inside the tank. You can do these very, very easily, and in a case of something like this, you can have a heavily planted tank and only have something in there like air stones or pump heads just to create flow, and allow the system to, by nature, filter the water for your fish. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages here. The advantage is, it's all in the tank, it's simple, it's easy, once it's set up. Sometimes the setup is far more complicated than our other filtration options. The downside is, often it takes a long time to establish this, and usually you have to be fairly lightly stocked in your fish and wildlife in those kind of systems in order to not overload the system. And there's a lot of nuance here, but just take it very simply. It makes it easier to understand that way. That's the natural way of filtration. Then we get to the next one, which seems similar but is different, I promise you, is internal filtration. Most commonly when we talk internal filtration, we're thinking about something like this: a sponge filter. But you could also look at things like breeder boxes, the like internal canister filters, any form of, whether it's powered by electricity or air, like a breeder box or a sponge would be, any type of mechanical or other biological media that is housed in that normally would not exist inside the tank is internal filtration. And you could say that some of the natural filtrations that I mentioned earlier are also internal filtration, and specifically this is probably the anoxic system because of the undergravel style plenum system. We'll differentiate those a little bit just for the purposes of understanding that very typically the internal has some form of mechanical filtration that is designed to also house our bacteria colonies, and it's intended to go at a higher flow rate, whether that is by actual power in the case of internal canister filters, or in the case of our sponges and our bio boxes and all that kind of stuff. There's like the Zis bubble biomedia, that's another internal filter where it's an internal moving bed. They're all designed to run under fairly reasonable flow rates of air or actual power to move a reasonable amount of water. What's the benefit here? Usually these solutions are very cheap, and in the case of all the ones run by air, they're very inexpensive to run too, because you just need an air pump. They add mechanical filtration that some of the other natural systems don't do, so that you don't get super cloudy water, but they do require extra maintenance, which most of the natural systems do not require aside from standard water changes. So this is going to be something like taking that sponge filter and cleaning it out so your water doesn't get too cloudy with particulates and these things don't plug up. In the case of internal canister filters, it's the same thing. You're pulling them out long enough to service the media that's inside it, or maybe change media. If you use chemical filtration media inside them, then you're setting it back in there and getting it going again. The other major benefit here is because it's internal, you typically never risk any form of water leakage like you would with external filtration, but you might consider external filtration. So let's first define that, and then we'll talk about how you pick the one you really need. External filtration is going to be most commonly for us something like this, a hang-on-the-back filter. This happens to be a tidal, but it doesn't matter, right? This is some kind of big basket and a pump to hold media, whether that is purely biological like ceramic rings or to hold sponges, whatever it may be, so that water gets pumped into the basket, runs through the media, and flows out. The major benefit to these is they can handle significantly higher bioloads than the other two forms of filtration. They also can tend to produce a lot more flow and move a lot more water. For certain species of fish, this can be extremely important. The downside, you are sending water outside of your fish tank. This has a chance to cause some form of leak, water loss, various other issues. Most of the time this is unlikely, but it is still a possible point of failure for your fish tank. We are containing a bunch of water in a glass or plastic box in the grand scheme of things when we're talking about fish tanks. So anything that adds a chance to have that water exit the fish tank poses some danger to our fish. But there's other forms of external filtration, not just hang on the backs. If you want to get real serious, you start looking into something like this. This big bad canister filter. This happens to be an Eheim Professional series, but there's a million different canister filters out there. Everything from the Fluval FX6, the various cheap knockoff filters, the penguins, all those things, right? There's a lot of canister filters out there. They're all just basically a gigantic version of the same thing we're doing in a hang-on back. It is a powered filter that has lots and lots of room for different media and can handle a very large biological load. So if you have a very densely stocked fish tank, or you want to make sure that you have the highest possible bio load in a smaller fish tank, think something like a heavily aquascape tank, something like that, where the lesson generally is the better the bacterial colony, the better it is for the tank's health in the long term. It's the same principle. This is an external filter because you can go all the way up beyond the canister filter into the range of sumps. Now, sumps are way more common in salt water than they are in fresh water, but there are plenty of people out there who absolutely adore sumps and will preach their good word. My friend Corvus Oskin is a fantastic example of this. They all serve the same purpose. Basically, it's a very large system, whether it's the hang-on back all the way to the sump, to hold a lot of media and generally handle significantly more water flow. The big advantages here is that, for the most part, we are able to more densely stock our tank, create significantly more flow, higher turnover rates. So this can be better for certain species of fish. It can allow us to keep far more fish in a tank. Or it just is kind of a safety mechanism in the back of our head, knowing that, like, we can filter significantly more water than the stocking of our tank is ever going to get to. Something like putting a big canister filter on like a 25 or 30 gallon aquascape tank, right? These are ways to make sure that we have significant filtration capability for the highest level of water quality. Is it necessary? Not always. So let's talk about what the right filter is for you. Number one, whenever I suggest a filter to someone, my first question is going to be, what's your maintenance routine? Are you expecting to service this filter once a week? Once a month? You only want to do it every couple times a year, maybe? Then that determines the kind of filtration we can look at. You generally don't want to be doing sponge filters or a smaller hang-on-the-back filter if your plan is not to service it once every month or two. If you're going to wait a year to service that filter, you probably want to start looking into something that's bigger and can handle a lot more of that before it clogs up and loses its capability. Now, if you're planning on servicing that filter very regularly, every 2 weeks, once a month, at like the longest possible being once a month, then now you want to start looking at maybe sponge filter is all you need. Maybe a hang-on back is the most you need. They're relatively fast to service. I can service them very quick. I can clean them out, get them back running again. It's not that hard, and because of its size, I only need to do it this often. This is one of the biggest things that I suggest is looking at is your maintenance routine to understand what kind of filter you should start looking at. You don't really need to service a canister filter every month. And if you do certain augmentations like pre-filter sponges and things like that, you can go even longer. Yes, that's ways to extend certain filters, but keep it simple, okay? Just try not to hot rod too much here, guys. In the case of natural filtration, there's no service. It's just making sure that the system is kept the way it needs to be. So keeping your plants healthy, making sure that your plants survive. In the case of a plenum, making sure that it continually has the right level of airflow if you're going for an anoxic system. In the case of the deep sand bed, it's just making sure that your water moves around and has some oxygenation to it, because the aerobic bacteria need to handle it that way, and then the movement helps for the anaerobic bacteria to do the rest of its job. Now, if you're planning on having a very high fish load, you don't want to look at a natural system. You're going to need some form of beefier system. Now, whether that's sponge filters or breeder boxes, some kind of internal filtration, or going all the way up to a sump, that really depends on the size of the tank and how many fish you're going to put into it. If your plan is to have a 40 breeder with 20 tetras, a sponge filter is probably all you need. But if you plan on having like 125 gallon with 40 African cichlids, now we probably need to start looking at something like a canister filter or a sump, because that's going to produce a lot more waste because we've got bigger fish in higher quantities and we're using a very large tank. The final thing that we want to consider is flow. If you're keeping fish that don't like a lot of flow, you probably want to look at gentler filtration systems like the internal systems or natural systems and keep your fish stocking low. This is something like a betta tank, right? A very simple sponge filter or even just some plants and an air stone can be all you need for a single betta. If you're going like a betta and some of this and some of that and some gouramis, and now you want to start looking at a powered solution, but something that is not too much flow or has controllable flow so that there is nice calm spots for those fish to relax and enjoy. On the contrary, maybe you want to get together a river stream, the hill stream style tank, right? High flow rates. Sponges aren't going to do it for you. You're really going to need to look at a canister or a sump, something where you can push a lot of flow out of it. Even hang on the backs, even like one of my favorites, the Tidal 110, which has a fairly high flow rate, usually not enough to get that true hill stream level of circulation. You really need to start looking into either a canister filter or a sump, or even potentially multiple filters to push enough water around to get that kind of environment. So in the end, what's the right answer? That's for you to decide. I hate to break it to you, but actually, the best filter is not determined by someone on YouTube like me. The best filter is determined by you and understanding, one, what Filtration 101 has taught you. What type of bacteria is going to be housed? Are you using mechanical filtration? Are you using chemical filtration? This kind of tells you what housing you need to do this work. If your goal is only to have some simple mechanical filtration, which will also house your beneficial bacteria and run everything off air, you're probably only looking at something like a breeder box or sponges. But if you want to have a very complex system, something like Purigen or some other kind of chemical filtration additive, maybe you want to have very high flow rates, now we start looking at our external powered filtration in order to satisfy the needs of that particular project. It's really simple. Understand your project, go back to the basics, understand what you need in that filtration system, and that's going to give you the answer of what the best filter is. Plain and simple. Is it a sump? Is it a sponge? Is it a canister? You'll be able to answer those questions very simply just by examining those few factors. Flow rate, fish, maintenance schedule. You're done. Those will tell you everything you need to know. And then from there, it's just about understanding how to compile the media you need and what that filter in that system is that fits your needs. Do you need some crazy, super expensive canister filter? Do you need the ADA Superjet on your 20-gallon tank? Or would an Eheim Classic 150 do the jam for you? You'll be able to answer that question very, very simply after you examine those few little criteria and go, here's the boxes I need to check. Here's my answer. You'll find it. Trust me, you'll figure it out. So with that being said, that's it, guys. This is the end of Filtration 101. I really hope that you have enjoyed this series, that you've learned a lot. I would love, love, love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. You know, what was the biggest lesson you learned? What did I forget? What did I do wrong? I'm sure there's going to be a million of those comments. But, you know, the goal here is not to go hyper scientific. We really want, like, just enough science to understand the topic broadly, right? To get that high level understanding so that when you make your next decision when it comes to filtration, or maybe you're making some alterations to your tank and you need to re-examine how you're filtering your tank, you'll know the basics of what you need to keep your fish very healthy and to keep great water quality. If you didn't like this video, give it 2 thumbs down. And I guess I'll just have to keep talking about stuff. What should be the next 101 be? We'll have to figure that one out based on the number of dislikes, right? If you're new to this channel and you like educational stuff like this, along with some product reviews, live streams every Tuesday, consider subscribing. Maybe even ring that bell. We'll do the usual magic YouTube algorithm crazy nonsense. The like, the comment, subscribe. You guys know the drill at this point. But seriously, that's the best way to help your favorite YouTubers. It's not simply that interaction, right? That tells Grandpapa YouTube algorithm, like, help this person, or that this is great stuff. Keep advertising them to other people, or whatever the heck it may be, right? Whatever voodoo witchcraft that, that YouTube does in the background. But seriously, that's it, guys. I'm looking forward to reading your comments. We'll be getting back into tons of stuff here soon. Maybe comment down below, what should the next 101 be? As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.